I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, welcoming you to the Mosaic of Wine Series 2. Giving my audience of wine lovers, students and professionals from around the world access to some of the most interesting, successful and influential people working in and around wine. Series episodes explore the guest's backstory, covering their foundations, growth and legacy, using Interpreting Wine's Mosaic storytelling model. I'd love this episode and this series to be the start of a conversation, so please make sure you're subscribed to Interpreting Wine podcast to be alerted when each episode in the series goes live. We kick off the Mosaic of Wine Series 2 today in the company of Stefan Neumann, Master Sommelier. Hearing first Stefan's origin story, discussing his Epiphany Riesling and family support, before exploring his Master Sommelier journey and support network. We discuss his current role as a consultant and how he stays on top of client trends. We discuss challenges on the Master Sommelier road, barriers to entry into wine, and future changes in the wine industry. Enjoy.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be here. Secondly, yes, my junior sommelier exam, a real key turning point in my wine journey. It was actually the beginning, really, of my wine journey. It was in the penultimate year of my hospitality school. Feels like a long time ago. Maybe it's not. It's about 20 years ago now. It was in 2003. And at that time, because I did the hospitality school in the fourth year, we sort of had an exam about several different practical elements within the hospitality industry. So there was a cooking exam, there was a service exam, and there was an opportunity for me to go for a junior sommelier exam. And I think it's the first time in my life that I've studied so much, so long, so hard for one exam. So that was it lit the flame to realize for myself, hang on, I really like wine. I really like what this is about. So I actually studied a lot, and I was never the top student in my class, but for this junior sommelier exam, I certainly excelled without even pushing myself in that sense of like no one pushed me to be very good in this. It was just like purely self-motivated. And I think in terms of people which supported me during that time, was some of my colleagues during that time. And with some of them, I still stay in touch. I think maybe the biggest support at that time was my family. I'll be brutally honest there, because I think it was just like really important that you had a good network in place. Your family was there, especially my dad. And it formed a really special relationship with my dad as well, because he loved wine, despite the fact that he's not working in the wine industry. And I think that bond still continues today, that we love to talk about wine. And there's still some other friendships. I still remember one colleague of mine, really good friend now, which is Andreas Huber, and we both learned for that exam. And we still stay in touch ever since. It's not only about wine; it's just generally a good friendship which developed.
Yeah, no, very cool. And I think something that would be really cool for me to hear as well, Stefan, is actually just to locate us, the listeners, as to where you grew up, because I believe that you were never far from vineyards, and it was always in your future to go into wine.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. Thank you so much. And I live since 2008 in the UK. I never really lost fully my accent, but I'm Austrian by birth, so I was born in Austria. And I grew up very close to wine growing areas. Absolutely, I grew up in Lower Austria, very close to a wine growing area which is called Wachau. So listeners which are into wine most likely will know it for their wonderful Rieslings and Grüne Veltliners. So yeah, that's pretty much where I grew up. So definitely surrounded by wines and vineyards.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's also, great that you mentioned your dad as well, because I believe that there was another of these kind of key turning points, and maybe it was your Epiphany wine, let's say, was when he opened a special bottle of Riesling for his 50th birthday. So yeah, could you mention that and put that into the context of the story as well?
Yeah, actually it happened in the same year as my junior sommelier exam. So 2003, and my dad opened a 50-year-old Riesling. My dad turned 50th in that year, and it was a really special moment, because in the end of the day, it's very rare that even nowadays, that you try 50-year-old wines. So when I tried this, and my dad was like really, really excited about it, so was I, because I had to open this bottle. And it was a Riesling from the Kamptal, from a pretty much unknown producer, but it's one of the producers which got like a really good library of all the vintages. And I reckon this was the moment for me in my life where when I tried this, I was like, my God, this is delicious. And if I could just learn a little bit more about wine and, God forgive, I could even make a living by, being in the wine industry and just make enough money, I would be a very, very happy person, because I was just literally a little bit overwhelmed by the complexity and the intensity of this wine. And purely the fact that something can age 50 years and taste that good. I think there's not many things out there in terms of a product which can last that long, but not only last that long, but really excel when it becomes older. So that 50-year-old Riesling was a real treat, but another key turning point. Thankfully, it happened, as I said, in the same year as I did my junior sommelier exam. Maybe there was sort of that extra motivation which I've got.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It obviously wasn't served blind. Then you didn't. You didn't have to identify it.
Funnily enough, it had actually no label. The only thing which was on the bottle was it was mold everywhere, and people are always scared these days when they see mold. But actually, for my experience, for all the wines, when you see that, like for example, there's a little bit of mold growing over the cork, is actually really good preservative. And even till this date, before all the wines are getting released, they really get the label pretty much last minute. They're being stored in the cellar at a good level of humidity, and naturally there's some mold development, and then they get cleaned, labeled, and being sent out. At that time, this was literally taken from the cellar, nothing done to it, sold and opened. And the cork, despite the fact that it was like 50 years old, was in still pretty good shape.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I guess it's a good reminder. First looks and first impressions don't always tell the full story. So yeah, that's a great tip. And I think let's maybe fill in a little bit more of the story, in your journey, because I just sort of throwing in something that we spoke about in the pre interview. I know that you mentioned that an application letter of support from Alexander Koblinger was again another sort of crucial moment. So yeah, maybe again in whatever way makes sense, kind of continue the story from the junior sommelier exam. What were the experiences that you had following that turning point?
This is a very good question. So thanks for letting me share that, because I think it's kind of an interesting story, and it still makes me laugh all these years later. But effectively in 2008, I graduated in 2004, and in 2008 I thought, like, it would be a really good idea to work abroad, because I want to have that international experience. Austria is a lovely country, but it's relatively small, so I want to have that international experience. And I was like, I really want to go to London and to the UK and explore that. And I realized very quickly London is a bit too expensive as a first job. So I applied for a restaurant which is called Le Manoir Garde-Saison in Great Milton near Oxford. And I wrote my first application letter, didn't hear anything from them. And the gentleman at the time while I was working with, he did just his preparation for his master sommelier exam, Alexander Koblinger as well, a fellow Austrian master sommelier. He said, well, apply again, just mention my name, because I used to work there a few years ago. So I wrote exactly the same. I didn't change anything. I just changed the first line saying, Alexander Koblinger, he used to work for you a few years ago. He recommended me this position. And literally, I think it was 24 hours later, they called me back. And another 24 hours later, I had a phone interview. And I just remember I was still back home then. Walked into the living room with my parents and said, I've got this job offer to go to a 2-star in Great Milton. And I mean, at that time, we barely could locate Oxford on the map, let alone Great Milton. And I was like, I just want to go for a year and see how it is and get that international experience. I mean, little did I know that 2008 was the year of the financial crisis. And I said, well, I just want to go for 1 year, get that experience, and then come back to Austria and do sort of my proper sommelier exam. So graduate from the junior exam and do a sommelier exam, a certified sommelier exam in Austria. And my dad was like, yeah, cool, fantastic. My mom was a bit skeptical. And as it happens to be, I stayed like, more than 15 years now. So I think my mom is in that stage that she has forgiven me. It took her a while because 1 year turned into 15. But my dad was, I think my dad realized very early that he said, that's it. It's like, he's going to go, but I'm not sure when he's going to come back. So I think that really was a key turning point for me. In the end of the day, it was just one name which I put in there, Alexander Koblinger, 2 words. That really changed my life, effectively.
Yeah, and again, it almost feels as though, because I guess London and the UK and these experiences are so rich, I would say, and the wine opportunities, let's say, and the career opportunities are so rich. It almost feels as though, that 15 years, as you mentioned there, that probably includes a lifetime of experience that you could have had back in Austria or in any other perhaps smaller market.
Absolutely. I mean, in the end of the day, it's like when I started at Le Manoir, I started actually as a breakfast waiter because there was no opening in the sommelier team. Neither had a great deal of experience abroad, my first experience really. So I worked for a few months as a breakfast waiter in order to get the opportunity at the later stage to come to or to transfer to the sommelier team. And I remember there was a Czech sommelier there, Daniel Kubini, which is now currently actually working in Austria. And he sort of persuaded the French head sommelier at that time, why don't you give this Austrian chap a chance? And probably the main reason why he did it is like he wanted to have less French sommeliers in the team. So he wanted someone else. So, and of course, sometimes people always think, oh, one name changed everything. But, you still have to put in the work. It's not because you got your foot in the door and everything is going to run smoothly. You still have to work the hours. You still have to study. I mean, I recall at that time when I started in Le Manoir and when I was a breakfast waiter, all I did was I did my breakfast shift, which was a long one back in the days, in the very early start. And I studied all the time for wine in order just to get that one opportunity and one chance when I transfer that I can make a good impression. So you still have to put in the work.
Yeah, no, I think actually those two experiences side by side, I really like how it's almost like yin and yang, It's like saying, okay, you've got to hustle, you've got to put your, write the second letter and put the name in there and follow up. But absolutely, like if you didn't have the skills, to underpin that, then it wouldn't have mattered who would vouch for you. It will only ever.
Absolutely.
It doesn't even to say get you so far. It'll only ever open up so much of the door to you, and you have to sort of walk through. You have to take the opportunities yourself after that. And I think again, as we're still talking about people though, and as I say, it's always where I like to start the conversation. I do think obviously you've got those magic letters after your name, MS, and I think it would just be. We can't cover that everything, and every mentor and every colleague and every relationship along the way. I'm sure that, we'll have to have the 5-hour podcast version to do that. But it would be, I think, interesting for me and for the listeners just to maybe look a bit more on the Master Sommelier track and maybe talk about, what were maybe some of the turning points there. And again, some of the people that, maybe, stand out. I'm sure there were hundreds that supported you along the way, but maybe, again, one or two of the key turning points on that journey.
Well, I think, it's always about people in life, and the wine world is a very small, I like to call it this is a very small world or a very small village, effectively. Somehow we all know each other and we all at least heard from each other. And I think my journey for the MS exam really started in sort of 2010, 2011, when I sort of passed the first 3 parts, the introductory, certified, and advanced. And I worked for a gentleman called Isabal, which is a Turkish master sommelier, the only Turkish master sommelier. And we worked together in the restaurant called the Flat Duck. He was an absolute key supporter for this because we had a really strong team back in the days, strong in that sense, like we were very supportive to each other. We're not essentially best friends, but we had a common cause, and the common cause was like to excel in the different stages of the Court of Master Sommelier exam. So the introduction and certified, the first 2 levels, we pretty much all did in 2010 and then advanced in 2011. And Isa was always the person which pushed us, but in a way that, we worked as a team in order to achieve this. Because I think there's one thing which I really want to put out there. When you go for these exams, you're never going to make it alone. You're going to have a good support network in place. You're going to have people which not only support you with the knowledge and the exchange of information, but people which support you mentally. So you need to have a good friend, family, a good relationship. You need to have really a good support network in place. So Isa was a big, big mentor at that time. And later in my career, certainly the person which massively supported me was Mark Hastings, which is the current GM at Broadwick Soho. And at that time, when he supported me, we were working together at Mandarin Rental. And I might, I haven't mentioned this to you before, but it's a heartwarming story. I do recall this very vividly that I always used my personal holiday in order to study for this MS exam. And I recall this one day where my assistant at that time, Vincenzo Arnese, which is now the director of wine at Raffles Hotel, he came up and said, you know what, I know your holiday is coming to an end this week, but I know you're studying, but everyone from the team would like to pull in some extra shifts, and we would like to give you additionally a week off so you can study. And we already run everything by Mark Hastings, so you have an additional week. Literally, he said, just enjoy, study, and make us happy, make us proud. So at that time, it was an unbelievable experience for me that I was like, my entire team, it was 8 Soms at that time, all put an extra shift so they could cover my floor shifts. And I had an additional week off. And I mean, that generosity at that time was pretty much unheard. So, it's never just one person which supports you, and never a couple or a handful. It's really sometimes a team effort. I will never forget this. And that team was really special. And these memories stick with you. So I think that really helped. And, that journey for becoming a master sommelier, it's a long journey. You start, I remember my first attempt was 2013 and I passed in 2017. So I had 5 attempts. And it was not one attempt was easy. Not one attempt felt like, there was a walk in the park. But what certainly helped to me personally was just like, you got to put your head down. You got to have a study plan in place. And as I said, sometimes you got to accept that you can't be good in everything. And you stick to your strengths, and you sometimes hope for the best. You need a bit of luck on the day as well. No doubt about that. But it's really a lot of study behind the scenes more than anything else.
Yeah, no, it's an incredible story, and a better way really of just demonstrating how I kind of kicked off this conversation. Again, all those people, the ones that pulled those extra shifts, and the ones that I think obviously wanted you to succeed. I think that's also really interesting for me about what you mentioned there. How you sort of you formed this kind of really close knit support group, and you put the cause first almost. It's like, okay, look, everyone, it's almost like, strikes me as almost like, you hear about these stories of like in the army, or the there's this sort of absolute camaraderie, just like obviously in, different types of settings, but, everybody feeling supported and everyone having, I think would do the same for one another, almost like, again, thinking about the bigger unit. And it just always sort of struck me as...
Yeah, it's always about the bigger picture there. I think so, absolutely. And I think this is one of those things which sometimes you got to remember nowadays, that no matter for which exams you go for, and no matter in which sector you work, maybe the wine industry, hospitality, or outside of those, it's incredibly important that you have support. It's very rarely you make it by yourself, and actually having that support network in place, it really pushes you to new heights. It gives you that extra motivation.
Yeah. Also, I hope there's people outside of wine who hear this interview as well. You get a week of holiday and you spend it studying. I think it's very easy for people to think, you work in wine and you're tasting wine all the time, and of course it's your passion and it's your calling, but at the same time, it's always a sort of a pseudo holiday, right? It's not, you're not lying on the beach. You've got your head in the books and tasting lots. So I mean, again, it's so interesting to me because the structure of these interviews is always very different, but almost there we couldn't really separate people and culture, because I think that you brought up so many examples and so many stories about the support and just the genuine will for their fellow sommelier to succeed, and kind of for them to, put your cause almost slightly ahead of theirs. But that being said, I do. I mean, you know this. I've seen what I've done in this podcast and who I've interviewed. You do know that I've got a real soft spot for Austria. Which has been, I think, since around episode 10, I think was the first episode that I recorded over in Austria. And it just stood out for me on the questionnaire that you did before we spoke, Stefan. You spoke about the kind of structured yet joyful approach from that Austrian upbringing. And I just wonder, again, with a little bit of distance, which my guests from Austria don't always have that amount of distance. So I'm just curious, what did you mean by that, I guess, first of all? And what are the kind of strands of that you think, again, have helped to make you who you are today?
Yeah, I think, the cultural upbringing and the upbringing in Austria and the cultural influence, which I had, certainly had a huge impact in my life. I feel like sometimes when people ask what's the difference between Austrians and Germans, this is the way I normally explain it, is like that with both is very similar structured approach. We like to have things done on time in a certain way. The major difference is that Austrians always do it with a little bit more of a smile on their face. I purposely say more of a smile than a smile itself. But I think because we are in some occasions quite laid back and relaxed, but we still like to get things done on time. And I feel like this sort of still comes across in at least I hope it comes across in all the work I do. There's just no point in being too serious about certain things. Of course, we want to be professional, but the professionalism shouldn't stop by you delivering something without being seen as happy of doing so. So I think like it's really important that you get a joyful element into pretty much everything you do in life, because it just makes it so much easier and just makes it so much more, I think, enjoyable along the way. It makes it more enjoyable for your clients at the same time. And I think it's one of those where you see very, very quickly that as soon as you do something with passion, love, compassion, a certain engagement, and making other people smile, I think like everything becomes so much easier in life. And I think this is what really the Austrian upbringing sometimes is about. A lot of us are surrounded by nature. A lot of us are surrounded by some rather beautiful landscape. And I think very good life quality as of such. And I think that reflects that we strive in order to share our love with others too.
Do you think there's an element of that in the wine as well? I mean, I think when we spoke, I remember you telling me and mentioning that Austria is, in terms of wine production, is absolutely tiny. And again, maybe it's just because of the number of times I've been there, the number of times I've interviewed Austrian winemakers, the number of Austrian wines I've tasted. It's always felt like it's punching above its weight, or it's always felt much more significant to me. So I'm just curious. Is that something that you see coming through?
It's a good question. I mean, to put this a bit into numbers, I mean, you take all of Austrian vineyards, it's maybe something like 50,000 hectares, give or take, and in some occasions more, in some occasions less. You put this in an international comparison, Bordeaux as an area is anything between 110 to 120,000. That's just one area in France. And you take the total Austrian production, we are well into the single digits of the total French production. So, and then the other thing is, of course, what goes into the export is not a great deal either. So there's a lot of domestic consumption of wine in Austria. So really small production. And I think the last time I checked, it was like 3-4% of the total French production. And then something like anything between 70 to 80% stays in the country. So it's really for domestic consumption. Then you take them after, there's not much Austrian wine, which is hitting really the export market, let alone individual countries. And then you take the top export markets, that's Germany, I think Italy as well, very strong. And then UK, I think, is number 4, number 5. A lot of Scandinavian countries love Austrian wine. So there's not that much which is there. And I think when you get Austrian wine, because there's so many elements which come into it, it's very often in the occasions it's an organic certified or an organically farmed vineyard without certification, but it is certainly a wine which is made by people which do care, and certainly made by people which are very much connected to the land and very much connected to, let's call it for one moment, their terroir. And I think that reflects in so many of the wines. There is certainly some larger producers within Austria, but even these larger producers, they strive for quality. And if they export, the export market, in particular the UK, is a pretty unforgiving one. If something is not good, it will not stay here. So I think Austrian wine in general is something which I always love to show to people which are not familiar with it. And I think there's certain varieties, and as well the wealth of indigenous varieties, which makes it a really interesting and really joyful approach for it. Because Gruner Veltliner, there isn't that much planted around the world. And in fairness, it's a bit like Sangiovese in Italy. It really strives at its home soil, maybe at its best. So Gruner and Austria is very much connected. So is Sangiovese and Italy. And if you think about those two varieties and you think outside of those two countries where you find prime examples, there's far and few. So I feel like that's what Austria really played to its strength of making it, on the one hand, approachable, lively, fair priced, and something which is very much connected to the nature and very good in terms of provenance. So there's so many elements. And I think Austrian wine is simply a wine which, it ticks many boxes.
Yeah, and it's, again, I guess it's one that you can be proud of, and it's one that you can sort of get out there and represent, and you see some of the joyful character of the winemakers as well. I mean, I've always found, it's how I would describe it. Yeah, sort of a balance. I've genuinely, just about every Austrian winemaker I ever know, they'll be, as you say, they'll be, really friendly, really, easy to talk to. But actually, there's this sort of look that comes in their eyes when they're talking either just to me about the winemaking, or more especially when they're talking to other winemakers about their processes. There is a real underlying sort of seriousness there as well, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think it's very good that you say this, because I think this is somehow the trick. They're incredibly serious when it matters. But they know as well that seriousness doesn't create sales. You still need to put a story behind it, and you still need to put and showcase your passion and your love for the product. And I think this is so often reflected in the wines. They are precise, they are clean, and nevertheless, as well, even within the natural wine scene in Austria, there are fantastic examples produced there. And the term natural wine, we may need to do another podcast for that. But nevertheless, the cleanness and the approach they have is of really trying to reflect where the wine is grown and what the variety is. So I feel like there's a real seriousness, but there's a real joyfulness about it.
And crazily enough, you've just reminded me, this actually isn't your first time on Interpreting Wine. I remember you were there as part of the biodynamics discussion we had with Saracen, if you remember, back in the day. It was back in February 2020 of all time. So it's
yeah, I do recall. Yeah, it was a few weeks before the lockdown.
No, exactly. So no, I'll have to link it up from memory. It was episode 370, but don't quote me on that. It's not always easy for me to remember all of the exact numbers, given the numbers that I put out there. Super interesting. Again, I think hopefully this is even just giving one person listening just wow, okay, I like the sound of Austrian wine. I'd like to check something out. And I think you've given plenty sort of locations and steers, and of course there's loads of content on this channel as well if you really want to kind of go down the Austrian wine rabbit hole, let's say. But moving forward, let's focus a little bit more on that expertise and being one of a very select number of master sommeliers. And I know something that you pride yourself on, Stefan, is that balance of on-trade and off-trade experience, and how that kind of positions you to address many aspects of the wine world. And, talk to us about, I guess, that dual perspective and, I guess how it ties into, let's say, the breadth of your consultancy work that I know that you engage with.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because I always feel like this is something so important, that if you're sommelier at heart, which I think a lot of us out there are, and you work in the on-trade, so you work in restaurant hospitality, you really have a good understanding about the dynamic of this sector. But there comes a moment and a time in life where you realize you're not 25 anymore. You might need to make a change for whatever reason that may be, But what really influenced me with the last years, so I made the decision of going self-employed about 5 years ago and founded my own wine consultancy, and I work as a consultant for Fels, so traditional company founded in 1858, predominantly family-run estates, and it's owned by 3 different shareholders. The one which is, I think the lion's share is the Symington family, which is a family I always greatly admired, and they own port brands like Graham's, Dow's, Wars, Vesuvio, but they have some really, really good dry still wines too in their portfolio, and some really good as well English connections there, because they just bought a share in Hamilton, the first or oldest British vineyard there is. So I think when I tapped sort of in that sector of off trade and worked sort of on both sides now, on and off trade, you really get an understanding that in order to be good in a consultancy work, sometimes it's good to have experience in both of the sectors, because these days, when a client would approach me for a specific project, may it be a presentation, may it be an event, may it be a training, it is actually so beneficial if you've worked or are still working in both of these sectors with on and off trade, because you really get to understand what both sectors want, need, desire, and actually it sort of feeds a dual purpose that on the one hand, you can deliver something which makes the client happy, because it's a very targeted approach. But on the other hand, you are really happy about the consumer, or in this case, for example, the on-trade, where you can deliver training which is really on point. It highlights the important aspects and the aspects which are important to them. So actually having an understanding of both of these, I normally say it's quite a rare combination, because there's a few master sommeliers out there, and a few of them would run their own company in terms of a wine importing company. But there's very few which work as a wine consultant and have this on and off-trade experience. And I never say I'm proud of myself with doing them. I'm just very grateful that I feel like I have an understanding about both sectors. And it certainly is something which comes a bit with age and a certain level of maturity. And both of these experiences are fantastic in a way that I think it just hopefully makes you a more complete consultant. And it gives you the opportunity to really deliver something which is special to the clients and to the end consumer.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. And again, it was when we first spoke, it was a differentiation that I thought was, important to be able to make. And I think, what would be, again, based on, I guess, those 5 years and very different sort of 5 years, I guess, compared to normal times. But I would imagine, though, still over those 5 different years, you've been able to start to pick up on, I guess, different trends in terms of the market, who's targeting primarily London, and I guess as well maybe also some trends in terms of yourself, in terms of the way that you respond to those different requests, and what types of questions you're asking maybe, and what you think are the first steps that you might recommend for people to make. So I think that would be my next question. Really, is what trends are you seeing? You're now a consultant. You're not in the day-to-day service. What are the types of requests you're getting, and how are you tending to respond now over time?
Good question. I think it changed so much over the last years. From maybe the first time we spoke till now, I think the wine world is very dynamic, and the requests, essentially, despite the fact that they are quite diverse, but it boils down quite often to one thing: is I always ask my clients first, what's their ultimate best goal? What's the ultimate best outcome you want to have? And how can I help you to achieve that? It's like really that listening part, which is the most important. So if you listen to your clients, that goes for so many things in life. It's not only in the business, but it's really understanding what the client wants is maybe the most important thing. And I think like over the years, this changed for me so slightly, because what I see in terms of trends and fashion now, it keeps on changing. And a few years ago, when I started, it was like, it's all about organic and biodynamic. These were the buzzwords. Now it's about low intervention, natural, provenance. So it's like, it keeps on changing. Now it's as well a certain trend for no and low. So there's so many things which keep on changing. And I think, as a consultant, you still keep on learning on a daily basis. I think what I see now, and I think that's maybe the buzzword right now, it's so much about personalization. It's really creating a personal experience, and an experience which leaves you with lasting memories, and something which really connects you to a certain product or a certain service. It's so much about storytelling, and it's so much about getting that brand message across without spelling it out one word after the other. But it's really trying to personalize as much as you can. And I think a big other trend of fashion, and what is really important these days, is the training aspect. You can have the best food in the world in the restaurants. You can provide the best delivery service, whatever it may be. But it's really the personal aspect. It's how you train your staff. This is something so important. I think a lot of people realize that I can have the best chicken wings in town, but if I don't have anyone to describe that these are the best chicken wings, it doesn't really matter. And if you make a wine example for this, you can have the greatest selection of wines in the world, but if you don't have someone who can convey that message and make it sound appealing to the consumer and to your client and to your guest, it's not worth much. So it's really about the personalization element.
Okay, that is literally that could be a 4-hour. Anyone that knows me and knows the types of posts that I put out there and the things that I talk about, then that there's literally a million things that I could ask there. But I think to again keep this to the 1 hour version. I think I'll just respond on the very first point that you made there, Stefan, and I think it's what I get from that really is that. There are a lot of different regions. Let's say if we talk about wine regions that are trying to kind of crack the UK market, or just want to get a presence here, or change their strategy slightly, maybe if they're one that's already established here. It just seems to be that there are more regions than ever before trying to get into the same space. I think it was something you spoke about earlier. It's just a kind of an uber competitive one. And I'll be honest, maybe, and not specifically to anything that you're talking about, because I know you've you invited me to other events before, and they have been very personalized. But I personally don't see enough personalization when I go to masterclasses or I go to tastings, because I think, again, as you just said there, it feels as though a lot of those regions, regardless of where they are in the world, they jump on the bandwagon. They try to give us what we think we want. Oh, low alcohol wines. Oh, we can make fresh wines. We can make low alcohol wines. And honestly, from my perspective, everyone ends up sounding the same. And this may be kind of preempting why they might want to seek you out. But yeah, I'm curious. Are you seeing that yourself? Is this something that you think could be a problem?
Yeah, I think it's a fair assumption to make. I think one word to that, the current duty and the upcoming duty change doesn't really help of making low alcohol wine either, because it's not beneficial for that. It's not a system which is designed for low alcohol, and it's a punishment for high alcohol. But nevertheless, there's certainly an element which people want to make it personal and they want to stand out of the crowd. And it's absolutely right when you say it's an uber competitive market within the UK and especially within London. I always recall this one event which I did. It's about half a year ago, and I did it with an Austrian chap called Lenz Moser, and we did it at the Peninsula. And it was to launch his latest addition to his rather small portfolio. He produces wines in 4 different countries: Austria, where he only does one wine in Portugal, 3 wines in Hungary, and it was about the launch of his Tokai 2013, 6 Bodonians. And he produces wines in China with Shangyu Moser 15th generation. And the idea behind this tasting was not to show only his wines and saying, oh, these are the best wines in the world, and we do this organic and this biodynamic and natural yeast and low pH and whatever, where it all sort of becomes one message. It was actually a very open tasting, still a curated tasting, partly blind, and actually putting his wines against his competitors' wines. So, for example, for the Tokai, we put a Decem 16s next to it. We put a Chateau Farc from Sauternes as well next to it. We put another Tokai next to it. And for the still wines, we put some top white Burgundies. We put some wines from Santorini, because there was a connection we're trying to find with volcanic soil. If you go to Tokai, very strong volcanic soil. And without going too much into the volcanic soil analysis, but high in certain xylites and rhyolites contents. So it was really interesting to make the comparison to Santorini, which obviously has a quite high volcanic soil content as well, very low organic matter, and sort of trying to make that comparison here. What fascinated me about this, and that's the reason why I love doing this event, because it was from the moment we had this idea of having something like 20 wines served predominantly blind. It was the invite lists of getting some top journalists, some top members of the press, some wine buyers, some directors of wine, some head sommeliers, some wine influencers there, which sort of was really a quite diverse group of people, including the likes of Francis Robinsons, including the likes of directors of wines from 5-star hotels. And we really were trying to sort of say, guys, it's not about saying we are the best. It's really about we have some of the finest palates in this room, some of the finest tasters. You need to make your own opinion what you feel like is best. And actually, we just there to provide a little bit the platform and the theater and a bit the fun element there. So it was actually really interesting to see what people were thinking about putting Tokai 2013, 6 Bodonians by Mad Moser or Lenz Moser with his collaboration with Count Tokai versus a Decem. And I think, it's just quite an eye-opening experience for so many that it's not about saying, oh, we are the best and we're going to prove you that we are the best. It's more about letting people come to their own conclusion. It's a much more powerful thing to do. And the aftermath of this event was wonderful for us, because we just had quite a lot of follow-up articles which were written about it, quite a few things which were published online on different social media platforms. So it was actually just it was a relaxed tasting in that sense of like we all had fun, but it was serious to say actually, no, it's a different approach than maybe others have done before.
Yeah. It does. No, it absolutely does, and it reminds me really, really strongly, because again, I think we forget sometimes when we do something so often. I think again, speaking with myself as a consultant as well, we can't always just be looking forward. I think we've got to look back and, as you say, think about why was that event different? Why was it such a success? There were things that you did differently there. It wasn't a cookie cutter. Oh, we've got all the wines lined up, and you just go around and taste them. And it actually reminds me so strongly of an experience I had over in Oregon. I was very lucky in 2020. It was a busy start to the year. I got to spend a week over in Oregon, going around. I interviewed 18 or 19 winemakers in that week, and totally without any encouragement or, without, I believe, any kind of need, they started talking about each other's wines. They would say, oh God, I really, really love, Doug Tennell's wine is fantastic. Or, Brienne Day, she's amazing. And, oh, wow, we sell fruit to her to make that, or we get fruit from here. And that is just the secret sauce. It's like, that's one thing I wish that more events wouldn't do, that, or interviews or content. Just try to kind of put the blinkers on you and make you feel as though there's no other wine in the world, only our wine, only think about our wine. And I just think that we're more sensitive to that, and we push back against it. When you try and force us too much to just look at one thing. And I love that example there of, wow, we're going to have some of the best wines in the world, and you make the choice. You tell us. Let's have an open discussion about this. There is no right answer, and I can imagine it was a lively atmosphere based on that.
Absolutely, it was. I mean, it does remind me of something else, which will partly answer the question which you've asked and the one before with on and off trade. So I'm going to give you another event slash project I've done this year, which was for me fascinating. Is actually one of my personal highlights as well, which was the I4C, the International Cool Climate Chardonnay Conference. I'm always very happy when they abbreviate it to I4C because it's quite a long name, but they invited me to be a keynote speaker this year. And I was quite nervous about this at first, but actually gave me a really good opportunity to combine my on and off trade experience and try to make it a unique experience for the participants. And it was around 300 or so people, which participated in several different masterclasses and that keynote. And the one thing which sort of motivated me, because I had the experience from the on-trade sector with what do sommeliers think about cool climate Chardonnay and how do they sell them to their guests. And then my off-trade experience where I was like, what do importers think about this? And how do they structure their portfolio? And then actually for me it was sort of that magical triangle. And the triangle was a bit like, how do producers think about this? And I actually at that time contacted purposely 3 different producers, one from Austria, which is called Sattlerhof, South Styria, cool climate Chardonnay, fantastic stuff. I contacted Mac Forbes from the Yarra Valley, love Mac, larger than life character. You ask him a question, you always get an honest answer. You gotta love him for that. It's just amazing to see. And I contacted Laura Catena from Catena Zapata in Argentina, and we spoke about cool climate Chardonnay, white bones, white stones from the Adriane vineyard. And actually those 3 producers, with my sort of triangle approach of focus on trade, off trade, and producers, I hope at least it made it quite compelling and quite interesting for people to listen to, because this is where I was really thankful that I had the chance to work in the on trade, work in the off trade, and had that relationship with these 3 producers in order to sort of combine one common message. Or actually give a message which hopefully came across like we are all quite united when it comes down to this. What is cool climate and what is cool climate Chardonnay? So there's so many things which come with this, but just wanted to throw this in there.
Yeah, and this is it. I think it's a point well made, because again, to break through the noise, which again is what people always say to me, just crazy as it is, it's getting more and more difficult to give away free wine, isn't it? And that isn't necessarily enough to get people through the door anymore, or to get the results that you want. So I definitely pick up on creativity, I think, and keeping that North Star in mind as well. I definitely can relate to those 2.
Yeah, I think for everything you do in life, you got to have a drawing card. You got to have a good reason for people to come, whatever that reason might be. But you almost have to give them an incentive. You almost have to give them something where they'd be like, oh, that is the reason why I want to come. May this be a specific old wine, a release, a comparison, a unique way of presenting it. But you always have to give them a reason for you to come. If you just give them free wine and come to my tasting, that's not going to be enough these days.
Yeah, crazy as it sounds. We're a tough crowd, I guess, in the wine industry. So listen, we again very naturally, very sort of organically, we I think have gone there into talking about service and talking about the things that you uniquely bring to your consultancy work. There is actually one other part of challenge really that I think it's important for us to cover, and it's something that actually came up in my conversation with Julian Gorbuth of the Institute of Masters of Wine when we spoke a few weeks back, which was just how many people leave the Master of Wine program before completing it. And I believe that there is a similar, we can make comparisons, let's say, at least with the Master Sommelier program. I believe because there is only one opportunity a year to take it, and arguably more difficult because I understand that you have to pass the complete exam in and of itself in that 1 year, in that one sitting. You can't complete the theory and then sort of come back for the practical. So again.
I know
You can. Okay.
You can. So you've got a 3-year window to pass all 3 parts. For the advanced exam, you can't before. So the advanced, which is sort of that equivalent to the diploma, you have to do everything in one go. For the MS, thankfully, you can sort of split it in different parts. But it doesn't stop people from dropping out because it is just incredibly hard to organize yourself that there's some things which you're naturally better at. Some people are more naturally gifted tasters, some people are better in theory, and some people are just naturally born good service people and have a very good practical approach to this. And it's effectively the 3 parts which you have to do. It's a theory, it's a blind tasting, and it's a practical part of the MS exam. But there's certainly a dropout rate which is there, which is fairly high. And I think there's one thing which, for myself as an MS, I have always the greatest respect for MWs, and I hope it goes both ways. But it's a tough exam on both sides. It challenges you in different ways. It challenges you to really put a lot of things which you have going on right now in your life aside and focus on this specific exam. So it does take a lot away. And I think that dropout rate, it is, I wouldn't say it's fairly normal, but there's a moment in life where it's maybe easier to do this than others. There's a moment where you feel like you're in the right headspace, you are well prepared, and sort of the questions, the exams, the wines come your way where you'd be like, yeah, I feel motivated and I feel good about this. And I think somehow, it's not a shame sometimes to say I don't want to do this or I drop out of this, because it always reminds me of a very, very good German friend I have. He's a fantastic sommelier. He runs his own wine consultancy. He's not an MS, but do have respect to him for his knowledge and for his wisdom and for his in-depth understanding about certain subjects. Absolutely. The title is one thing, but it's always the person behind it. So I think, when you drop out and you say, this is not for me, that doesn't essentially make you not a good sommelier or not a good master of wine. I think, it's just a very personal thing. In the end of the day, it all boils down to one thing. It's the people which are the most important thing. It's people which make the difference.
And on your side, from your view, those people, they don't sort of, maybe overstating it a little bit, but they don't sort of fall through the cracks though. I mean, because again, to get to the advanced level is something that, hardly anyone does anywhere in the world. So to try to reach Master Sommelier and not reach there, it's like, you're even, further along in your career in many ways. But I can imagine that it can be seen as, I didn't make it there. And just curious about that,
I think if you've passed your advanced sommelier exam for the Court of Master Sommeliers, you should be very proud because it is a tough exam. It is. I think there was recently a number published. I think within Europe, there's maybe 500, maybe even within the world. So it's not that many. So actually, if you go on the website of the Court of Master Sommeliers, I think there's every advanced now listed which passed this exam. So it's not that many. So if you have some spare moment, you can check that. But going for the MS, and I think in total since 1969, something like 270 or so people have passed. So it's not that many either. I think, what is it, maybe 400-ish, 450 Masters of Wines out there. So it is a tough exam, but just bear one thing in mind, maybe not passing doesn't mean you have not learned something. I think this is what these exams are sometimes about. Just because you don't get to that certain percentage to make you pass, that still means you have extended your network. You still means you have trained, still means you have more in-depth knowledge, more knowledge about a certain region than before. So it still makes you a better person as of such. Yes, it's devastating if you don't pass it, but you still learned and developed. I always like to compare this a little bit with when you go on holiday and you have like your luggage with you. Yes, you don't come back with that badge in your luggage, but you come back with the experience, with extending your network, and still with lots of relationships which you formed, and still with more knowledge than before. So you actually packed your luggage with many other things. So it's never just an empty journey.
I like it, and hopefully there's space for some wine in that luggage as well, and it arrives in one piece. So listen, so I would love to start to close out the interview really, Stefan, and just I guess revisit purpose, which is what I really think is really around what motivates you, and I believe from your side, it's about leaving people with unforgettable experiences and deeper connection to wine. In a sense, I'd love to just to take a step back, and I guess in parallel, really talk first a little bit about what do you think are the primary barriers that prevent people from fully engaging with wine, and I guess give us again some thoughts around what are the sorts of changes that you're hoping to make as we look forward and on the verge of going into a new year as we are.
There's multiple answers to this set of questions there, but let's start with what's the barriers for people to get into wine or to understand wine or to appreciate wine. I reckon the upbringing certainly has an impact. I grew up in a wine growing area, so wine was always part of my life and my culture, and was very much part of a dining table and very much part of maybe a dinner or a lunch. So it was always an integral part of our life. I think barriers certainly could be that people see it maybe as pretentious, and you need to have a certain knowledge. And I always feel like when people say, I'm not quite sure, but if I like this wine, I don't like this wine. And it's like, it boils down to one question: you like it or you don't like it. And you don't need to have a great knowledge to understand if you like it or you don't like it. It's actually sometimes just being brave enough to take that first step. Everyone will have an opinion about wine. Everyone will somehow like to share that opinion. But for you as a person which is not sure of getting into wine, it's really just giving it the first attempt. Sometimes just being very open about this in a restaurant and saying, I don't know that much about wine, but I know I like certain aromas, certain flavors. I've had wine from this region before. Is there something you can recommend me? It's actually starting sort of a dialogue and starting a conversation with the person which is looking after the wine within a restaurant. And it's actually sometimes having this conversation even with your friends which are not into wine and saying, hey, I recently tried this and I thought like it was fantastic. So I think like sometimes it's starting a dialogue in order to understand wine a little bit better and leave that pretentious stigma out there of saying, it's a pretentious beverage. No, it's not. It's something, I think wine is a wonderful beverage which actually brings people together more than anything else. So it's having that first step. Now, other things which could be a barrier is that you are more health conscious. You want to say, no, I'm not quite sure about the alcohol consumption. So there is still some no and low alcohol options out there, not only in the world of wine, but there's many things which can sort of ease that path into the world of wine. I feel like what has happened in the last years with the no and low category, there's some really, really good examples produced. I always say maybe the no category is the one which has done the biggest jumps, the biggest leaps forward. But I think, if you start with that, when I look at sparkling tea, which is out there, non-alcoholic sparkling tea or low alcohol sparkling tea, for example, from Copenhagen Sparkling Tea Company, where they do 3.0, 3.5% ones. You look at the amount of kombuchas which is out there. So there's plenty of alternatives which sort of can ease your way into wine, because in the end of the day, if I take a non-alcoholic sparkling tea, I can certainly draw some parallels to wines in terms of aromas and flavors which you get. So that might be one thing. I think when it comes down to other barriers, it's just trying to be open-minded, and actually, even as so-called wine experts, we don't know everything. We will still be open-minded to explore new things and not follow trend or fashion by the first call. We'll still aim to especially in the hospitality industry, it's so important that we make our clients and our customers and our consumers happy. In the end of the day, when you come to restaurants, you pay to be here. We don't pay for you. So ultimately, it's a service industry. So our aim is to give you a good experience. And to answer the other questions, of course, with my consultancy, this is one of the most important things. You want to leave people with a long-lasting memory, and you want to create unique experiences. This is always a tough challenge, because this is just ties a bit in with listening to your client first. But I recall something which I've done recently for a wine body, Le Vin de Beaujolais, so the official Beaujolais community, which was about creating an event in London. And I thought, we need to highlight the aspect that Beaujolais, and especially the crus of Beaujolais, 10 of them, they're all quite different in terms of exposure, altitude. So my first approach was, we meet in front of the London Eye, and we try the highest elevated cru, which is a Chirouble, and then we go to one of the highest points in London with the London Eye and have actually very nice views. So it puts a bit things in perspective. And then I was like, now let's try some white Beaujolais, because there's a few percent of the total production is white Beaujolais, but it still offers a very good and compelling alternative to white Burgundy, because it is something different, still based on the same variety with Chardonnay. And then I was like, the people's thinking out there are saying Beaujolais can't age. But then we had like Chateau Moulin Vin with a 2014, so 10-year-old Beaujolais, and it aged gracefully, and it was a fantastic drink to have. So unique experiences sometimes thinking what the market's perception are about a category and trying to put comparisons out there and trying to create an experience which be like, yeah, I've been to the London Eye. I will never forget now that the Girouble is the highest elevator cru. Now I know that white Beaujolais is based on Chardonnay. I will never forget that. And I can definitely confirm that Beaujolais can age. So it's like unique experiences can come with many different plugs in that sense, and a couple of different scenarios.
Very interesting.
I hope
super interesting. And again, I'm just as I'm going to give the last word to you, but I'll hold myself back because I think that there's a lot that I'm passionate about on the content side of things, and thinking about how events like that, which are amazingly well conceived, can be kind of extended and turned into these sort of ongoing experiences, really. But I think that'll be a part two, hopefully at some point. But I do want to again leave you the last word. I know that you mentioned your website, stefanneumann.co.uk. I will include the link in the description as well. And again, looking ahead, your plan to publish more content, and I believe you've also got an online blind tasting course and other free content on there as well.
Absolutely.
So let us know what's coming.
Thanks for giving me that opportunity. Thanks, Loris. First of all, it's been fantastic to spend this hour with you. Second of all, thanks for everyone who's listening. Yes, websites, as mentioned, link in the description. And yes, I do have an online blind tasting course, which I sell from my website. And this is actually something which came along during the pandemic. Instead of doing banana bread and sourdough bread, I thought like it's a good idea to do something for the community. And I created an online blind tasting course, which is basically designed to help students to pass their blind tasting exams. And it's 60 or so plus videos. There's more content coming. There's as well more free content, which is coming, which I publish on my website. And it's a way of giving, for me, something back to the community as well. And I do run one-to-one tastings, and I do run group blind tasting courses. And for me, something which I may not have mentioned to you before, but I support as well the Curious Wine program from Queen Wong of inclusion and diversion for MS NMW candidates, of helping women in wine of passing their respective blind tasting exams. So that's something else which I really love to support. So you can always check this out. And I think like for me, this is sort of a good closing statement as well, in that the world of wine is small. We're here to support each other. We're here to help each other as much as we can within our capacity and within our time. And I feel like everyone, as well for me, being in MS, always learn sometimes more from my students than I feel like they learn from me, because it's a mutual two-way exchange of information. And actually, thanks for giving me that opportunity on this podcast here to share my love and my passion for wine.
A huge thanks to today's guest, Stefan Neumann, Master Sommelier. Make sure you visit stefanneumann.co.uk, the link is below, to learn more about Stefan's work, including the blind tasting course he mentioned. And why not reach out to Stefan to let him know what you thought of the episode and ask any questions that it might have raised. Next time on Interpreting Wine, Mosaic of Wine Series 2 in episode 578, I'll be speaking with Krista Bengtsson, founder of Star Wine List. You can always stay up to date with everything new at Interpreting Wine over on Instagram, where I'm at Interpreting Wine. See you soon.